Take it. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the first session, academic session of this today's International Conference on Ambedkar, Democracy and Nationalism. And we had a very fruitful session, inaugural session, where several ideas have creep up. And we have with us today Dr. Gajendran Ayyadurai from Göttingen University, Germany. He's going to talk on de-Brahmanization, casteless identity, democratic society, notes on Ambedkar philosophy on humanism. Before we are going to start this session, I request Professor Adapa Sachinarayan sir to be on the dais. Please come to the dais, sir. And he's going to be the discussant of this today's session. And request Vadanam Srinivas. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Gajendran, welcome to you. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Gajendran, to the seminar. Eagerly waiting for your this thing. Prior to you taking over the session, I would like to introduce you to the audience. Dr. Gajendran Ayyadurai is an anthropologist and a historian based in Göttingen, Germany. Before his going to Germany, Gajendran taught at Columbia University, City University of New York, William Peterson University, USA. And I got a chance, we were the batchmates in Jawaharlal Nehru University. And after a decade or so, like when I went to Columbia University, fortunately he was there, he invited me to be a panelist on gender and caste. And he was a learned scholar, and he has published several works on culture, memory, history of casteless Tamil, Indians in Tamil, English and German. And he initiated a new subfield, critical caste studies, with scholars from India, Europe, and North America. The today's topic, which he is going to cover, is de-Brahmanization, casteless identity, and democratic solidarity. To give a brief about his talk, the abstract of his talk is the scholarly work of Ambedkar beginning to draw the global attention now. However, there is a tendency to confine Babasaheb Ambedkar philosophy and relevance within the limits of the politics of the caste-oppressed communities in India. This is primarily due to the presumption of what could be called Brahmanical national arrogance, which forces Indians to own up the caste identities which Brahmin males have been portrayed. So this conversely, Indians who are culturally, historically opposed to the self-privileging caste groups are demonized as untouchables, ex-untouchables, broken people, and so on. So unsurprisingly, this has scattered the situations of the largest democracy, a simulation of the largest democracy in which casteism is rigidified. So in contrast, Gajendran argues in his presentation, which you are going to listen soon, is Ambedkar's philosophy, like in many vernacular casteless and anti-caste predecessors, is aimed at the process of de-Brahmanization, de-casteization of India. Significantly, it is not only to educate the caste oppressors, shed their self-ghettoization of birth-based exclusionary caste life and casteism, but also to urge them to join the casteless and anti-caste Indians in solidarity. That is towards establishing casteless identities, caste-free and inclusive democracy, which still remain unaccomplished after 75 years of Indian independence. This is the brief of his presentation, which we are going to listen. And before Gajendran speaks, I would like to invite Professor Arpa Satyanarayana to start the discussion on the topic. Thank you.
He speaks or after it is.
Just
Okay.
So, Professor Arpa Satyanarayana would summarize the talk which Gajendran is going to make his presentation. It's my honor to invite Gajendran to this session, which he's kind enough to accept our invitation. And thank you so much being with us, Gajendran. We're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
It's morning here in Germany, so good morning and afternoon there, and so good afternoon to everybody in India and in Hyderabad. And, it's truly a pleasure to be with you all in this conference, and Professor Sudharani has taken the initiative. A very important theme to talk about Ambedkar's thoughts and practices. So it's I really appreciate and congratulate Professor Sudharani for that. Also, it's a pleasure to join hands with her this theme, and along with my other resource persons, Professor Alone and Professor Narendra Kumar and others. Well, I have a PowerPoint to share. I'm going to upload this. Hope it's. Let me share this. Do you all see my PowerPoint? Yeah? Okay. So is there anybody who could say that are you able to see my PowerPoint? Yes? Sudha or anybody, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, please. Yeah, we
Okay.
could hear you, and we can see the PPT also.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, as Sudha said, the title is De-Brahminization, Casteless Identity and Democratic Solidarity, Notes on Ambedkar's Philosophy of Humanism. Now, this is the plan of my talk. So I'll maximum, I've been given 30 minutes. I'll try to stick to it. I'm going to begin by talking about Ambedkar's thoughts and practices, how they are getting peripheralized. Professor Lakshman Satya in a way prepared the ground for my talk, when he used how Ambedkar is marginalized. But I'm going to look at marginalization a little differently from the way Professor Lakshman Satya looked at. So I'm going to talk about how Ambedkar's thoughts and practices are peripheralized. And then secondly, in contrast to that, and how do we re-centralize Ambedkar in India and Indian diaspora? Okay, there are millions of Indians in different continents of the world, like I am speaking to you from Germany. So how do we re-centralize Ambedkar is very crucial. And then the third element that I'm going to talk about is, de-Brahminization. I'm not the first person to use the word de-Brahminization, but I'm trying to sort of give some kind of conceptual definition for us to move forward. So, and I think de-Brahminization is a prerequisite for de-casteization. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then the fourth element is, and I'm going to talk, what could be the possibilities of reinventing, reconstructing, or inventing casteless identities in India and overseas. How do we do it? So that's the bit I would like to discuss. And then finally, and I'm connecting all this with, how sort of a democratic solidarity between casteless and anti-caste Indians could be made possible. Okay, so That's one. And then after all this, how do we actually, we are all academics, and I'm sure there are some non-academics too are joining us here. But I'm very much interested in our everyday political practices, at home and outside, public, private and public. What could be the potential practices of de-Brahminization? And then we forming casteless social identities and relations, extremely important, right? Casteless relations and so on between humans, between Indians. And then out of which how, democratic solidarity is possible. So, and then that I would like to conclude after that. And my talk is based on absolutely on we feeling. I know, people from different religions and so-called multiple castes, and then atheists, theists, anti-caste people, casteless people, they are all here. And I think I'm talking to you with the we feeling that we all have to come together to take on the nasty, dehumanizing institution that has been ruining India for a long, long time. That's called caste. I always write caste/casteism. I don't see any difference between caste and casteism. The moment I say I belong to this particular caste, be it a Nadar or a Parayar or a Brahmin, I am a casteist, right? So there is no good caste or a bad caste. Every caste, anybody who wants a caste identity is deeply problematic, and it has to be questioned, like race. If a white man is going to tell you, I'm a white racist, and you have to do this, we will reject that. We will question that man, right? So likewise, every caste has to be questioned, out of which a we feeling could emerge. So I speak to you with a we feeling. And in a minute, my experience, and by the way, I have a PhD from Columbia University, New York. And I went there only because of one reason. The most educated Indian of colonial period, that is Dr. Ambedkar, went there. Therefore, I followed his footsteps, right? I could have gone to any university, be it Harvard, Princeton, Cambridge, or Oxford. But I went to I chose only to go to Columbia. Had I not got it, I wouldn't have gone. So that's my connection. First point, Ambedkar. And then my first exhaustive reading about caste and understanding that I am a casteless. My identity is I'm a casteless and anti-caste Indian. Casteless, anti-caste Tamil. That is where I settled down to. And this confidence, this clarity of my thought in private and public has come from definitely Dr. Ambedkar. And it's because of me reading all his volumes and writing first on his work. So my very first publication is on Ambedkar's thoughts on representation. All right. So I finished all his volumes, internalized it. That's how I wrote that piece in the 90s. I wrote 1990s, Ambedkar's thoughts on representation. And some of the points that I said then are still I hold on to. Secondly, I introduced annihilation of caste. Probably I'm one of the first Indians to introduce annihilation of caste in my syllabus in India. Okay, in the 90s. Imagine me putting annihilation of caste into my course, and I taught that. Okay, so and still I don't think in many universities you can offer annihilation of caste, and I did it in the 90s, and that's a very influential text for me. And then thirdly, I had the fortune of meeting Mother Savita Ambedkar, that is Ambedkar's wife. I had the fortune of meeting that mother and spending time in Delhi. So these were the great moments and I've had, and from all this, I've gained this we feeling and the necessity of we reconstructing a casteless India and Indian diaspora. So with that, I'm going to move into my further, in details, the talk. The marginalization of Ambedkar. So the marginalization happens in few ways. I look at 3 points of view, among many. One is how the self-privileging caste groups, right? Self-privileging caste groups condescend, and then looking down upon Ambedkar and marginalize him, peripheralize him. That's how it has happened. So the privileged caste groups, most of them felt threatened by Dr. Ambedkar. And therefore, how do you, and he was making in multiple languages, in Marathi, in Hindi, in English. By the way, Ambedkar knew German. He got admission at the University of Bonn. I've seen his letter, the entire letter in German. He was an incredible mind, right? Thankfully, he didn't come to Germany, he went to Columbia. So how many Indians could have had that kind of qualification, Dr. Ambedkar? Nobody was as qualified as Ambedkar was during the colonial period. Let's get that clear, right? Nobody could speak with as much clarity and that kind of accessible English like Ambedkar, right? And yet you condescending call him, a Mahar leader, as I say here. He was marginalized as a Mahar leader, right? And now he is called as a Dalit leader. So all these phrases are calling him a Dalit leader, everything is to re-marginalize him. And the privileged caste groups, shamelessly, who call themselves as caste groups, divisive, and they call Ambedkar as a Mahar leader, whether he wanted to have that category or not, he didn't want to, right? So that's one set, privileged caste groups marginalizing Ambedkar. The second sort of process of marginalization is through the tragedy of the caste oppressed communities in India, again, sadly, re-marginalizing Ambedkar, again, calling him a Mahar leader. So there is this 1986, EPW article by Neera Barra. Was Ambedkar just a leader of, Mahars? Powerful title, right? This was at EPW piece in 1986. Please have a look at it. And then clearly, the author, Neera, says that he was not a Mahar leader, but a representative of the depressed classes, okay? And is one way right. On the other hand, it's a problem. Was he simply the leader of the depressed classes? Why did he talk about the Hindu women, right? Hindu women and their property rights. And yet Neera, with all the sympathy towards Ambedkar, re-marginalizes him as a depressed class leader, which is deeply problematic for me and for all of us it should be. He was for all Indians. Let's get that clear. Eleanor Zeliot, by the way, who I knew personally, and in a way, I didn't like initially Eleanor Zeliot because she also reduced Ambedkar as a Mahar. And then she rephrased the title from untouchable to Dalit. Even there, I have a serious problem with the title. Okay? So how did she call Ambedkar as an untouchable? Did he, so why would she do that? And then again, by putting that category Dalit, does she do enough justice to Ambedkar? I'm not sure. So I had problems with even Eleanor Zeliot's categorization of Ambedkar as a Dalit. Anyway, I'm developing that critique now. The third is this. The Indian feminists have miserably failed. Imagine Ambedkar resigning his position as a law minister on this issue of Hindu Code Bill, which meant property rights for all women, particularly Hindu women, right? And how many Indian feminists take up Ambedkar as one of the primary influences in their thoughts and practices? Complete betrayal, right? So the women for whom Ambedkar fought and resigned his position have betrayed him in general. So this is the third. One could go on many aspects, but these are the three things. So the privileged caste marginalization, unfortunately, the caste oppressed Indians also reduce him as a Mahar leader, Dalit leader, and so on. And then the women and the feminists have also kind of betrayed him. So that's how the marginalization has happened, So therefore, I view Brahminism, casteism is responsible for this, okay? And then here is a very important concept I'm introducing. The Western academic institutions and practices have succumbed to what I call Brahminical scialism. This is a new concept I'm working. This is going to be part of my next year publication in a big article. What I'm defining, and so I already, I was invited to be a keynote speaker in a conference called Theorizing Anti-Casteism at Kolkata University a month ago. And I introduced this concept called Brahminical scialism. And I've written a paper, which I presented 3 days ago in a conference here in Germany. And it'll be part of a massive volume next year. So I'm going to share this with you further about what I mean by Brahminical scialism. So I argue, there is something called Brahminical scialism, which has led to being, Ambedkar being seen as a Mahar and then to Dalit, and they stop there. They don't recognize him as a casteless and an anti-caste Indian yet. So what do I mean by Brahminical Sialism? This is what it is. I'm trying to conceptualize. Please follow it a little carefully. Considering, this is how I define it. Considering the casteism of Brahmins, I'm not trying to dilly-dallying with it. Clearly, I hold the Brahmins responsible for casteism. So considering the casteism of Brahmins, Brahmin male authors, Brahminical texts, Brahmin practices, I argue that literally, wherever Brahmin identity, Brahmin power, Brahminical exclusivism, and discrimination were upheld, they were all based on Brahminical Sialism. That is, they were only Brahmin male knowledge pretensions. So Sialism means knowledge pretensions. I pretend to be a knowledge holder, even though I'm cheating, I'm fooling. That is Sialism. Therefore, I argue, the Brahminical Sialism holders, they were only, pretending, that is, they were only Brahmin male knowledge pretensions meant to mislead and perpetuate institutions and practices of segregation. The moment I say I'm a Brahmin, I segregate you as non-Brahmins. I don't look at you as equal to me. You are down by birth. Could there be anything like that? Could there be any human be reduced as a lower caste? Brahmins did it. And that they did through fooling that what they have is a knowledge. It was not a knowledge, right? It's misleading, it's segregating. That's why the Sialism. So replace here you got to replace Brahminical knowledge with Brahminical Sialism. So in fact, these specious knowledge claims were unethical and irrational, right? The moment I own up caste identity, I'm unethical. I don't want to respect you. I don't want to treat you equally, right? Therefore, I'm unethical, right? And irrational, completely foolish, fictitious creation, right? Calling myself as an upper caste or a Brahmin, right? So that's why I'm saying it's unethical and irrational. And that the Brahmin Sialists, who are Brahmin Sialists? That is, those who engage in misleading and specious knowledge. They are called Sialists. This word comes from the Latin, so misleading and specious knowledge that are actually wrong. So what I call knowledge is unethical, irrational, wrong, yet I pretend to be a knowledge holder, right? So they were promoted in the early modern Europe. Imagine these Brahmin Sialists and Sialists, they were all, now I'm digging into their history, living in Europe. I've dug in, and it goes into early modern period. To be precise, early 17th century. The word Brahminism, around 1620s, 1630s, I repeat, 1620s, 1630s, the word was Brahminism was circulating here in Europe by the sheer foolishness of white European missionaries and travelers. So the white Europeans who went to India brought back, they held on to, the Brahmins. They took the Brahmin identity. Brahmins, by the way, they are not even 5%. They looked at India from this 5%, came back and started writing books and started spreading from the early 17th century. So tragic, right? So they did it, who did not care to reject Brahminical Sialism, but mimicked it for their own motives of proselytization and colonialism. So they wanted to spread Christianity and colonialism via Brahminical Sialism. So therefore, I conclude by saying on this section of Brahminical Sialism, anything that has prefix or suffix, even from the name, right? We have caste names at the end. I think it's a shameful tale, caste tale, which needs to be critiqued. Therefore, I'm saying prefix and suffix called Brahmin or any other self-privileged group is dependent on Sialism, right? It's dependent on fabrication. It's dependent on knowledge pretension. Therefore, I'm calling it as Brahminical Sialism, and it is exclusionary. The moment I say I have a knowledge, now I'm speaking to you, I'm sharing my knowledge with you, right? That means I'm treating you equally and I'm exchanging. We can agree and disagree on a level playing field, right? But the moment I exclude, that's not knowledge. I don't want to participate in the universal knowledge. Therefore, I'm asking, when somebody says I'm a Brahmin intellectual, I'm a Brahmin knowledge holder, that person is casteist and segregationist. that male or female can never be part of universal knowledge creation. So please start rejecting your usages such as Brahminical knowledge, Brahmin intellectual, learned Brahmin. All these have to go into trash cans. Okay, expose them as Brahminical sciolism and Brahmin sciolysis because they are not useful to humanity. They perpetuate casteism. So, and I find there are three modes of caste enforcement and Brahminical sciolism. Among many aspects, I find three modes. What are the three modes? One is civil societal mode of enforcing caste, enforcing Brahminical sciolism. The state taking the lead in enforcing Brahminical sciolism. That means perpetuating Brahminical segregationism, right? So civil societal aspects such as temple, education, these are all civil social aspects. What does a temple do? Does it perpetuate caste segregation or not? Tamil Nadu has 38,000 temples. How much do we have egalitarian space within a temple? Have we thought about that? Anthropologists from the West, anthropologists from India, and others have been talking about temples, but have we cared to interrogate this temple space as a perpetuation of caste segregation? Why haven't we done that as progressive Indians, right? Women can't go in. If they menstruate, they cannot go in, right? Gods did not say, men say so, that women should not enter the prayer room when they menstruate. So these are civil social aspects which need to target and question Brahminical sciolism. Now, the state also has played a crucial role in perpetuating Brahminical sciolism and perpetuating Brahmin sciolysis. People who pretend to be knowledge holders are upheld by the state, right? So which needs to be questioned and interrogated. And the third component that has perpetuated caste enforcement and Brahminical sciolism is our own academic institutions and practices. We hold Brahmin male as the best knowledgeable person. Completely wrong. If I'm going to say my identity as a Brahmin and then teach you philosophy, I'm cheating you. Let's get that clear. By the way, yes, Radhakrishnan, Professor Radhakrishnan, who went to Oxford, philosopher, he was a plagiarist. He stole his own student, Jadunath Sinha's book and published as Indian philosophy in the 1920s. He was going to go to jail, but he went to Oxford because he was a Brahmin, Telugu Brahmin at that, right? So please check it out. It's all available. All of us need to. So academic institutions have also perpetuated Brahmin sciolis, such as S. Radhakrishnan. Tragedy, right? I'll give you a quick example. Look at the state enforcement of Brahminical sciolism and Brahmin sciolysis. This is from, I have the reference here, from Bernard Cohn, one of the renowned anthropologists we had. Very sensitive, is one of my favorites. And I'm using his piece called The Census, Social Structure and Objectification in South Asia, which was published in 1987, right? And he talks about Ambedkar. He has this. Look at our first honorable prime minister. This is what our honorable prime minister says. India clings to me. Nehruji, Pandit Nehruji said this. India clings to me in innumerable ways. How? How? Racial memories. He used the word racial. Racial memories of 100 or more generations of Brahmins. I can't get rid of. So our honorable first prime minister was clearly, as I write here, upheld Brahmin race. That means Brahmin racism. And caste. He mentions the word Brahmin. And caste. So our first honorable prime minister was both upholding race and racism, caste and casteism. And he didn't want to give up. This was the start of our post-independence period. I leave it to you to judge every prime minister thereafter up to the present. Okay? Are they promoting Brahminical sciolism or sciolysis? So this is one quick example. I don't want to go more into. I'm writing in my article and book. I'm going to have a book on, definitely on Brahminical sciolism. All right? So you will see all this in detail with clear references, absolutely based on references. I'm not cooking up. Then I myself become a sciolist. I don't want to do that kind of a job. All right. So this is marginalization that has happened so long. Okay. I disagree with what a few minutes ago the keynote speaker said. Professor Lakshman Satya, that marginalization happened because Ambedkar burned Manusmriti. No. What is mainstream? Professor Lakshman Satya used the word, used the word mainstream. If the mainstream is dependent on Brahminical Sialism, I am not part of the mainstream. Who is mainstreaming? If the privileged caste groups are mainstreaming that they have done so long, we shouldn't be part of that. We people who care about India, whose parents have worked on the land, right? India belongs to us, the casteless and anti-caste people, not to the Sialists who are mainstreaming themselves. So that way I disagree from Professor Lakshman Satya on this point. So marginalizations happen because of willful marginalization of Ambedkar's progressive anti-caste and casteless thoughts and practices. Let's get that clear. Now, how do we re-centralize Ambedkar? So, so these are some of the points that I share with you. Let's think about that together. So taking the personal, political, and intellectual aspects rigorously, we need to take, together. Not his, he was talking about these three components. His personal, political, and intellectual aspects were always intertwined, right? And he was not talking about his own life. And he was connecting with every Indian. That is the power of Ambedkar, right? So that we all push towards more humane living. That is, we need to civilize ourselves. He wanted us to civilize ourselves, to get out of racial, like Nehru owning a Brahmin race, Brahmin caste. Ambedkar was precisely against that kind of man like Nehru, right? He wanted us to civilize ourselves against race and caste. And then, as long as it was very clear, as long as we hold on to caste, we are not modern. Let's not call ourselves modern persons when we hold on to caste identities. Absolutely wrong. So what do I mean by personal? So the self-privileging groups, they sort of self-privilege themselves as upper caste and subordinate, right? And in contrast to that, Ambedkar is appealing to both the oppressor and the oppressed to give up caste and race, to come together to create a casteless India, to give up casteism, right? It's not just one way, it's both ways. The oppressed have to give up their privileges. The oppressed have to join hands with persons who are ex-Brahminizing themselves, right? We were calling first our native casteless Indians as untouchables, right? You didn't care to ask, how does a Madhika or a Relli, would like to identify herself? Did you care? You put the category already, Relli, she is a Relli, she is a Madhika. Did you care to ask who they are? Nobody wants to say I'm an untouchable. No. First, I could be a casteless and anti-caste Indian, right? So that's where it begins. So the identities, right? So the personal aspects of the casteless, have to be taken seriously, and they have to also take the lead. They should not be called as first untouchables and then ex-untouchables, while the Brahmins remain as Brahmins. It's wrong. So ex-Brahminization and the anti-caste Indians coming together, forming a casteless India, is extremely important based on the mind. Ambedkar uses the phrase mind, and body change, and the political. So he clearly, what is public is based on the politics of each of us. Every one of us is doing politics, the way we speak, the way we do, the way we connect. So there, the personal politics and the public politics, they come together. Not just the moment the word politics is used, it's not just election and electoral politics. No, what we eat, vegetarianism is a politics. When majority of Indians are meat eaters, you feel so ashamed to talk about beef, to talk about pork. You can't come to India. You can't come to Germany. You can't live here if you don't eat pork. You can't live in the US if you can't eat beef. Please tell Americans, hey guys, don't eat beef. They'll kick you off immediately. Likewise in Germany, don't come and preach us, don't eat pork and so on. Germans will kick you out immediately. Right? So it's all politics, politics of vegetarianism. We don't have a serious dissertation yet on that. So personal, political, and then the intellectual aspects, right? So we need to really transform ourselves by, intellectually, to avoid the exclusionary aspects, to take in inclusionary values. So Ambedkar was like that, a caste-free person. And in all this, annihilation of caste for me is a quintessential text. So I think that text has a lot of ideas to re-centralize Ambedkar. I'm going to wind up in a few minutes. So de-Brahminization is a prerequisite for decasteization. Okay, so I write Brahmin in small letters, by the way. Okay, so look at this annihilation of caste. Caste is nothing but Brahminism incarnate. So Ambedkar was very clear that caste, Brahmins perpetuated casteism. Who invented untouchability? Brahmins. Probably the worst ever invention in the world. Okay, dehumanizing invention. The credit goes to Brahmin males for inventing untouchability, right? And then Brahminism. We don't have a book on Brahminism. We don't have a book on casteism. Please start writing, right? By clearly criticizing Brahminical silesis, criticizing Brahminical sialism, right? All that. So all these are very evident when he talks about caste segregation and so on in the annihilation of caste. And then see, look at what he's saying. Caste is man's inhumanity to man. He was not talking about just the untouchables. He was not talking about the OBCs. He is simply saying caste is a problem. We have not matured. This was written in 1930s, and soon it's going to be 100 years. We don't have a book against caste, meaning against casteism on Brahminism, right? We need to do that. I write, like I say, Brahmin. I don't write Brahmin with bold B. No, I put it in small case, just to ignore that category, Brahmin, okay? Then he takes on Shastras. He rejects Shastras, right? Systematically, that it has to be, he says it has to be destroyed. Shastras, because they mimic Brahminism, and the sanctity that is given to Shastras should not be given, right? Let's be very, very clear. And then he takes on, look at this, the intellectual class in India, I quote Ambedkar here, the intellectual class in India is simply another name for the Brahmin caste. The moment I use the word intellectual, you assume in India. The moment you use math, you assume Brahmin. The moment you use the word intellectual, you assume Brahmin. Completely wrong. This is what Ambedkar is exposing, right? Rather, he is saying, hey, don't hold on to a Brahmin sialism, right? People who pretend to be knowledge holders reject them. So therefore, I argue de-Brahminization is a necessity. You need to critique and reject Brahminism, in order to create decasteization. So it's the prerequisite for decasteization is de-Brahminization. This is where I define. I don't have time to go into that. So casteless identities. We need to talk about casteless identities. How do we do it? Right? You need to uproot caste. In annihilation of caste, Ambedkar says that, right? So you have to become, he says again, casteless and anti-caste is his own phrase, kind of, right? You need to reject that, right? So you need to become casteless and so on. And he talks about liberty, equality, and fraternity. Only when you reject caste, you develop the habits for liberty, equality, and fraternity, right? And he talks about conversion. He uses the word conversion. For him, conversion, of course, religious sense, but more towards liberty, equality, and fraternity. In short, with the democracy, he says. So conversion is not just towards religion, but more towards we becoming finding liberty, we finding equality, we finding fraternity with each other, sharing food, touching each other, hugging each other, okay, falling in love with each other on a level playing field, and becoming democratic, respect women, right? Their bodies, no subordination, right? Their liberty. So that's democratic solidarity. That's what I have in mind. I want to define this further and write. So casteless society, this is Ambedkar's phrase. That's where from there I have become a casteless Indian. I'm reading this for a long time. Am I a caste person or a casteless person? The credit goes to Ambedkar for emancipating me, right? So casteless society, we are yet to create. So that's a prerequisite for Swaraj. Swaraj for Hindus only, if it happens, which is nothing but a step towards slavery. We've been having Swaraj for the past 75 years. Are we free from caste, or are we into caste slavery? Let's think about that. He was a fantastic mind. He thought about it in the 1930s. Yeah, you ask for independence, 75 years. A woman cannot go to pee today, cannot go to toilet today in the field because she will not come back alive. When somebody is going to pee, you force yourself on her, have sex and kill her and hang her. That's our India. Okay, I leave it to you to judge how many minutes a woman is killed in the name of caste. So our country is multiple vernacular cultures, multiple languages. Telugu has importance. We have to de-Sanskritize Telugu to understand the caste, casteless and anti-caste Telugus. We have a long way to go. Sanskritize Telugu is not Telugu. It's Brahminical Telugu. Brahminical Silas perpetuated Telugu. Likewise Tamil, likewise Malayalam. We have a long way to go. So there are multiple vernacular cultures, multiple vernacular religions, economies, histories. Are they caste-free? We need to dig up this question. I'm not trying to romanticize. Thankfully, in Tamil Nadu, we are digging up archaeologically to find a place where it is no connection with Brahminical Sialism, no Brahmin Sialists, no Brahminical deities. It's good. So that way, India is a country of Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, atheists. We have to respect atheists as humans. They have the right to live. If a woman says, I don't belong to any religion, yes, sister, you have the right to be as an Indian. We have a long way to go to appreciate that body and that mind of a woman to be equal to us, whether she belongs to a religion or not. Okay, so that we become more civilized. So therefore, I'm going to finish with this slide very soon. So a need for new democratic identities and solidarities. This is the practices that we need to do that. We have to de-Brahminize ourselves at home. I don't want to have anything at home here in Germany that is connected with Brahminical Sialism and Brahmin Sialists. No, whatsoever. Goddesses, I want to throw them out. I want to be caste-free, right? I want to clear off, right? So it begins at home. So if I have a picture of a god, a male with 3, 4 women on the side, my daughter, what would she think? Oh, that means a man can exploit multiple women. I don't want to give that message to my daughter through that image. That deity has to get out of my house. So de-Brahminizing homes is very important, as Ambedkar wanted us to be, right? De-Brahminizing food. Let's not privilege pure vegetarian. It's sophisticated bullshit, really, right? Everybody eats, most of the people eat meat. But how come? How come we are killing people in the name of vegetarianism in India? I have a slide which I can show right now. The Bengali Brahmins were eating beef and pork and whatnot in the 19th century. So again, Bernard going to show us through his slide that Bengali Brahmin intellectuals were eating what? Veal sausages and cutlets. Veal means baby cow. So the same fellows are going after Muslims and Christians today to kill them because they are eating beef. Your own fathers and grandfathers have eaten that. So de-Brahminizing food is important. De-Brahminizing clothes, what we wear and so on. De-Brahminizing education. I've written online. If you check my name, there's something called de-Brahminizing education. I've written already. I have to write more. All of us have to do that, right? And then caste-free and gender-free inventions. What are the Indians? Have Indians invented anything to be at our home that is caste-free and gender-free? We have to push towards that. Our objects at home, we need to push to invent things that is gender-free, that every daughter should feel equal to a male child, right? We have a long way to go. So like for sexuality, what kind of sexuality do we teach for boys and girls? Okay, every movie is about love, Indian movie. But when young women and men fall in love, we kill. Which country does that? So let's think about that. Or what is this stupidity called honor killing in the name of caste? So we don't teach children to respect each other's body. Our children here in Germany, they learn about their body in their 4th grade. Their body parts, they are not even attained puberty. They know how the girls, when they are in 4th grade, they're close to 10-year-old or 9-year-old, they are ready to protect their body, how to handle it. Here in Germany, I'm proud in part of this society. So in India, as an Indian, I want that kind of gender-sensitive sexuality, which Ambedkar also thought about. That's why he came up with the Hindu Code Bill, respecting, and that's why he transcended caste to marry Savita Mother, right? So that way, we need to create caste-free new spaces of social gathering and celebration, except temple and some marriage. Do we have any other place where young men and men celebrate, eat, drink, and dance by respecting each other, without harming each other, without sexualizing each other? We don't have. We need to create that. It doesn't have to mimic West. We can have our own dance, our own food, our own drinks. As I said, on a level playing field. We have a long way to go, but these democratic identities and solidarities have to be created as we learn from Ambedkar. And I think the Annihilation of Caste text is a very crucial text. It sort of summarizes his whole life, his whole lot of text into it. We need to reread it. I reread it for the sake of this talk. I benefited a lot. Thank you so much. Nandri, vielen Dank. Thank you. I will take a little more time. I apologize. I stop here. I'm not able to hear you. Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gajendran, for being with us for this 1 hour, 40 minutes of your talk. Highly illuminating and talking about various aspects of caste and decasteization, de-Brahmanization. And before that, we wind up this session, Professor Adapa Satyanarayana. Yeah.
Question one or two questions.
Yeah. I think after Adapa Satyanarayan sir discussion, few minutes, we'll take few questions also. Gajendran,
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I'm there. No problem.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gajendran, for this excellent presentation regarding de-Brahmanization and casteless identities. And pointing out the centrality of the text of Ambedkar, Annihilation of Caste. While I agree completely with you in terms of de-Brahmanizing and casteless identities, but my query is, in everyday life, how are we going to put them into practice? You see, while I agree again with the necessity, but the whole question is, how are you going to do it? Taking a cue from Ambedkar, in his life and in his praxis, he has proved that it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
But today we are in a situation in which our identities are getting reinforced as Dalit, as a Sudra, as a Muslim. Of course, in this assertion or reassertion of caste identity is taking place in a context in which there is contestation. Today, the Brahmanical forces, the upper caste forces are legitimizing their dominance, in terms of these cultural categories. So I agree again with you, the necessity to re-centralize Ambedkar to counter the Hindutva forces. I would like you to devote a little time in clarifying how is re-centralization of Ambedkar going to help us in countering the Hindutva ideology. Thank you. Yeah, and Gajendran, would you permit us to allow a few questions, and so that you can react in the end, taking my comment with the questions that you that are some of our audience will let. Ready, sir, come. Please introduce yourself, all the scholars. First question, yeah, please, you can.
Whichever you pick.
I am Dr. Raj.
Are you able to hear, sir?
A little bit.
Come here, sir. Come here. Let him come here. Ramudu, next is yours. Right. Speak to this mic, sir.
Firstly, it's great to see you, Dr. Gajendran, after 30 years. I don't think you'll recognize me with this French beard, but yeah, we had good days in Delhi. It was thanks for teaching that word dialysis today on a pretension of.
Gaji, you remember All India Institute of Medical Sciences?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
This is Rajkumar.
Rajkumar, wonderful.
Yes.
Dr. Rajkumar. Thank
Yes,
you.
Dr. Gajendran. Hi. Such a joy to hear you. Firstly, thanks for teaching an English word today on dialysis, a pretension of knowledge. But I was wondering, there's an antiseptic version of dialysis in his history, that is perspectivism. Because it is as if you have every historian is tainted by an aspect of perspective or interpretation.
Right.
So is it really possible to have an interpretation-free history in the first place? Is it not a nice place to hide behind and say there's perspectivism and it's not stylism? Your implication was that the Dalit history has been avoided when Western missionaries were interacting with them. So there's one version of history that's been perpetrated, right? So we go against the challenge on perspectivism versus style. So I thought one question, I had a second one, but if I permitted. The second one is on the aspect of a casteless society that you projected here. It's an amazing thought, honestly. And Sir was asking about how you make it a reality.
Correct.
One of the thoughts was that is it not paradoxical to keep talking about caste all the time when privileges or taking privileges or avoiding privileges, whichever way you say, and yet again come to the real conclusion of not having the caste? How do you deal with the paradox? So just thought I had this. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Shripati Raman, one more question.
Yeah, sure. Feel free.
Thank you, Professor Gajendran, for a wonderful, not only thought-provoking, emotionally moving lecture presentation.
Thank you, sir.
My question is about, I don't know whether I have understood you in a right perspective or not, but the idea of Brahminical stylism has brought into so many other things also. It more or less looks like, sounds like post-truth. I could find so many similarities between post-truth and this idea of Brahminical stylism. I don't know whether my understanding is correct or not. You should correct me. This is only a conceptual kind of a clarity I wanted to have. And the three mechanisms through which the Brahminical stylism is being spread also needs to be included with the social capitalism, which is already been there. That's what is just, I feel. And just I wanted to have a conceptual clarification to explain more about that. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Could I go ahead with any more questions? I can take some more if there are. Okay. Should I go ahead answering or?
Yeah. Gajendran, I would like to ask, you spoke about the gender aspect of Professor Ambedkar, and I feel still after 75 years of independence, right from Hindu Code Bill to the present day, Ambedkar's perspective on women's empowerment, rather how a women, gender justice, rather, this is a correct, is not understood properly by the Indian society still.
Correct.
Because nowhere in the writings of the feminist writings, which I have read in various writings, except very few writings, they talk about Ambedkar as a feminist, who talked about women's rights and women's liberation and women's, the kind of empowerment which government is trying to portray, whatever Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, all these things. The constitutional rights of women are not being percolated to women, one thing, and not properly understood by the even not only the feminists, but Indian intellectuals, so-called, whoever, in the writings, recent writings also. Still that is missing in the historical narratives and across India. I just want you to reflect more on this and just, take the questions and please ask. Answer.
Sure. Thank you for all the questions, and I only have some tentative answers. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Gajen, one more question from Ravi.
Sure.
I request all of you to please be brief in your questions straight.
Hello, Gajendran. See,
Hi, Ravi.
how are you? See, I'm totally in agreement with what you were saying about stylism. Yes, for caste, it can be applied very easily. As Professor Sudha is mentioning, how do we apply the same concept to the gender justice? Because the the womanhood is not only in India, it is challenged and challenged everywhere in the world. Even the West has its own problems with the gender justice. Even the kind of articulation that has come from the West about gender justice, feminism, and all that is also a kind of protective measure for the vulnerable. So when we immediately jump into the process of or into the concept that you have proposed just now, okay, caste can be dealt in a way maybe, I don't know, I'm not clear because it's the first time I'm hearing this concept, but I'm more worried about the gender issue, which is across the world. Global, it's a global phenomenon, and globally the woman, the feminine gender has been exploited. So how do we apply the same concept? Because the relation between patriarchy, if you of the caste and the sexuality is very interwoven. So I think I request you to please throw some light on this.
Sure. Right. And any more questions? All right, I'll go ahead. Okay.
Please,
Okay. Okay. So thank you for all these questions. I'm going to think deeply about them as I progress in my work. So these are some of the tentative answers that I want to share with you. Begin with Professor Atappa, and thank you for your generous comments, sir, and appreciation. And this is a big question that you asked me. Practice. It sounds nice in a conference to talk, and how do we do it? This is a struggle that I go through, especially when, like you use the phrase Hindutva forces. The word Hindu was not even popular in the early 20th century. Let's be very clear, right? And it is on a foundation called caste. You pull the pillar called caste, there is nothing called Hindu or Hinduism, right? So anti-caste thinkers have been saying it for long, much before Ambedkar, and Ambedkar followed it up. So what do we do at the practice level? I'll think about something about Ambedkar, and then we need to really think more in today's term, because we cannot simply say, like Ambedkar said, therefore do this. We as multiple generations after him, we need to think about that also. So what do we learn from Ambedkar's practice against caste? First of all, so it's very clear he used the phrase casteless society. That means he was desperate to create a casteless society. What are the ways he has done it? So he was analyzing the concept of conversion, starting from annihilation of caste, right? What is conversion? So when you convert, and then therefore we see him moving to Buddhism. So that's one way, clearly, you switch. Do not connect yourself with anything called Hindu or Hindu identity, anything that a Brahmin would prescribe. Brahmin may prescribe as orthodox or authentic. So the authentic, when a Brahmin says this is an authentic way of doing, we need to discard that, right? See, he discarded, moved, converted to Buddhism, right? Reconstructing our own native casteless Buddhist tradition. That's one way. Also, secondly, why did he marry Madam Savita, Mother Savita? Why did he do that? So he was also practicing anti-caste marriage. So marriage is clearly a very important thing, right? To breach, to become anti-caste. We have not done that yet. I think these are some of the things he has done. But in terms of our own personal practice, we have a long way. So something like that, for example, I boldly say I am a meat eater, right? And I have the right to eat what I want, right? And I connect with my global community and then talk about it. And I wear what I want. This is the religious dress and all that. Another thing, at home, I am against prostration, touching the feet of people. Even saying namaste, I think we need to think about this. Is it right? Is it the right way of doing it? Please don't fall at anybody's feet. That's Brahminical. Let's give it up, right? So these are some of the things we need to adapt, and then what is, keeping women at the center. That's also very important. The moment you celebrate, for example, there is no book on menstruation. Okay, we talked about in our class. I used to teach about this. We need to discuss. I allowed my women students to speak about their problems and at home when they were menstruating. Right? We need to open up. This is like I'm going to pee or going to toilet. Men and women may do it. Do they have the space to talk about? So that way we are interrogating the sanctity of insulting women's body and what happens biologically to them should be interrogated. So that way, these are some of the practice where women take the lead in I will go walk wherever, whenever want, irrespective of what happens to my body, right? Men don't have any authority to say women from moving into temples. For example, in Fiji, in the Caribbean, where I do field work, I roam around in the Caribbean to understand Indian diaspora. It's a deep problem. So Indians have exported attack on women, their menstruating process into the Indian diaspora life too. So that way it's deeply problematic. These are some of the practices that every one of us should think, not simply say what Ambedkar said, or Ayodhya said, or Periyar said, or Kabir said. No, we as rational people have to interrogate, de-Brahminize ourselves. What this should be, I am not able to prescribe that. This is a struggle that all of us have to go through and find a solution. That's one. This is for Professor Adappa. And then Dr. Rajkumar, it's great to see you from so many years. By the way, he's one of the greatest surgeons in India. Dr. Rajkumar, I know him. I salute you for, even though you are a doctor, an excellent doctor, and you have this amazing power to think about history. I found you 30 years ago that way. I'm finding you now. Wonderful, wonderful to see you. So congratulations. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on what I said. Very quickly, I go with you on interpretation of stylism. What I find is, why did I arrive at that? And there are many quotes. I didn't have the time. I've spoken it. It's part of my YouTube talk or whatever it is there. Please have a look at my video on keynote address on theorizing anti-casteism. It's available. There I have slides to talk about stylism more in detail. Why do I land it up? People have misinterpreted. So misinterpretation is not interpretation. Okay, it's misleading. So there are academics who have accused Brahmins of misleading. And they've used the phrase like misinformation. So misinformation, misleading, these phrases hit me hard to think about this phrase called Brahminical stylism. That's what I mean. So it's not a simple, half-hearted interpretation. It's a clear misinformation, clear misleading you into something called caste, that I am superior, you are inferior. It's not rational. You ask me how I am a Brahmin, I will not have a clue. I'll say, oh, Ram said this, Krishna said that, Brahma said this, therefore I am a Brahmin. That's how I fool you. That's not an interpretation. I am fooling you. I'm misleading you. I'm misinforming you. Therefore, I am a stylist. Therefore, I'm indulging in Brahminical stylism. That's what I mean. So I don't put perspectivism and stylism on the same level. It's problematic. So that's, I'm leave it at that. And then casteless society, and how do we do that? Yeah, there's a paradox of everybody, you have to one up your Relli identity, Madiga identity, Mala identity, OBC. You speak only within that. You are Mandal. Don't go beyond. That's how the policies divide. That's why I said state perpetuates caste identities on you. There are some MPs who went to Tamil Nadu. When they spoke, they said, hey, you don't have your caste as your last identity. Bring that in. These MPs. They want you to own up caste. This is where state plays the tragic role of imposing caste so that they can divide and rule, right? So that way, reservation policy, they force you to own up. By the way, I've published, I have interviewed some people, anti-caste people in Karnataka, who said, I am not availing SC policy, ST policy, because that's how caste is imposed on me. And they are surviving in Karnataka. So they clearly say how policies impose caste. This is a tragedy. So how do we handle it? On the one hand, if you take away reservation from me, If it is going to brand me as a Relli or a Madiga or a Kurmi, I don't want to own it up. How do I survive? We need to talk about, they want to put you in 7%, 8%, 15%, 30, 26%. And you hold that and stop there. Not everybody gets that. So we need to be really, I think, interrogate caste. Maybe we may lose temporarily, but we need to fight against in multiple ways, rejecting caste identities of all kinds. So I stop. There is a deep problem, but we need to say I'm casteless and anti-caste. Okay, and be prepared how you defend. It's a struggle that we need to go through. And then the brother asked about post-truth. You may be right. I will think about that further. Post-truth and nihilism is a kind of, but truth, how the West have played havoc with truth and dominated colonialism, we know that, right? But here, I'm not talking, whatever I call as nihilism is not true. It's a fabrication, right? So we know that 2 + 2 is 4. We know H2 + O may make you water. It's very clear, rational. But nihilism is not truth related at all. It's a clear misinformation, misleading. So therefore, I don't know, philosophically, post-truth could be connected with sort of nihilism. I'll think about that. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely, I agree with you. Economic aspects, capitalism, nihilism should expose that, right? On the one hand, you call yourself as an Orthodox Brahmin. Yes, you are a millionaire and a billionaire sitting in the US, pumping in multi-crores into temple construction that would go against Muslims and Christians and others, right? And you will force people to clean the toilet. Yeah, and you will remain as a priest. So that way, the capitalism has to be interrogated, but not just through talking about Marxism. No, I have a problem. Not just talking about through Foucault and Derrida. No. Our anti-caste and men and women have been talking about for long. My thoughts come from our anti-caste thinkers. That's why I created something called critical caste studies. I don't know to Marx or Foucault or Derrida. It comes from our elders, anti-caste Indians, centuries ago, what they have fought about. Imagine, I presented in the paper, in 1626, a guy called Mukti Udayan in Tamil Nadu took on Robert D. Nobili, 1626. That's the oldest name that I've gone. An anti-caste Tamil, an anti-caste Indian, taking on Robert D. Nobili, who was imposing caste on him, 1626. So we have a long way to go to understand this history and the critical caste perspectives. About Ravi, I agree with you, Ravi. And sorry, Sudha, gender. I fully agree. Thank you for substantiating. The feminist movement has failed in turn taking anti-caste thinkers seriously. That's how I written a piece called Critical Caste Feminism. I can share with you later. This is my own phrase, critical caste feminism. Where does this come from? It comes from Swapneswari Ambedkar, who was an editor in 1907, okay? Called Pudiya Madhu and so on, right? And she called herself as Universal Sister, 1907. And she talked about women's body. She said, like, how do you expect a 15-year-old girl to be a widower? She will fall in love, have a baby. Because you are not allowing her to get married, she will kill that baby and fall in love again, 1907. Swapneswari Ambedkar. That's where I thought this is critical caste feminism. She attacks Brahminism for that, Brahmin silences for that. So my thinking doesn't go to any Western academics, Western feminists. It comes from our own mothers and sisters who have fought against caste. That's why I created the phrase called critical caste feminism. I've published this. It's available online. If you don't have it, write to me. I'll share with you. So thank you, Sudha. Yeah, and then finally about Ravi. Ravi, I fully agree with you, Ravi. How do we grapple with this? Policy, I think you are touching upon policy matters. It's a long way to go. State imposes gender divisions. My easy thought is clear. You give any position to a that's going to be definitely less unethical than a man, more rational than a man, more progressive, more inclusive than a man. So women leaders in all departments, in all positions, are more trustable than a man. And definitely, but I was talking to a bureaucrat yesterday, a top officer. She was telling me how women's bodies are exploited at different political level. It's tragedy. So we have a long way to go. So there are global aspects across the world, but the women have to be prioritized, that body. We need to take seriously, especially in India. Let's talk about India. Taking seriously women's position is important. So I'm sorry, I only could touch upon here and there. I stop here. I don't want to take too much of time. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gajendran, for elaborately discussing upon several aspects, and thank you so much for being with us and patiently putting up with all the questions. And I'll definitely read through your writings. And with this, we end the session with thanks to our Adapa Sachinan sir being the discussant, and all the participants patiently listening to the resource person and also actively participating in the discussion. Thank you so much. I request all of you to join us for lunch, which has been arranged. Gajendran, will meet you soon when you come to India.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Nice seeing you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I request all of you to please join the lunch, and certificates will be issued to the participants in the valedictory session by the chief guest, Professor R. Limbajri garu. And afternoon session will start, sharp in half an hour, because we are running short of time. So 2:30 we are supposed to start the session.